Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, Morgan Streetman, are you comfy working from home in your pajamas? Are you feeling, just relaxed and?
I wish. I wish.
That's
I
not
tell
the
you
case.
what. Yeah, I ran into somebody in the elevator this morning, and he said, "Are you going to work?" I said, "Yeah, man. Got to keep working if you can." If you can.
If we can. And a lot of developments, a lot of things are going to take place today. We're going to get a better understanding of how our own community, as far as Hillsborough, is reacting to all of this a little bit later, past when our show will be over. But
yeah, I guess we will. I mean, I've heard the rumors. You've probably all heard them out there as well, that there's going to be some kind of a shelter-in-place order issued in the city of Tampa today. Now, there's no, obviously, these are just rumors. Nothing's been confirmed, although Mayor Castor did say over the weekend that if the governor didn't act by today, that she was going to act, well, she thought she would act unilaterally.
They have to, because they shut down the beaches. And Kathy, who works on traffic with you on Q105, said, well, I got a suntan yesterday because they shut down the beaches, so I went to North Shore Park, where everybody that wasn't on the beach brought their umbrellas, their chairs, blankets, and she said the park was packed.
So now they shut the parks down too.
They are going to do that, I think. I mean, I know several in Hillsborough County had been shut down.
And
but
did you see Gandy Beach?
No, I didn't.
Packed.
No. Packed, yeah. I went to a park yesterday, a walking trails park, and there were a fair number of people there walking on the trails. I mean, we weren't hanging out doing the spring break thing. And I'll tell you, there were some funny videos from that last week. I don't know if you saw that. Some of those spring break kids to be a, to
young again and invincible.
Student. I tell you what. I don't know if you heard some of the quotes. There was one guy kind of went viral. He was pretty funny. Pat, you're shaking your head. You probably heard him here. I mean, a lot of people around here were fired up about that. They were really irritated about those spring breakers out there having all that fun. And by the way, if you're fired up about something and you want to get on the horn with us, give us a call at 888-404-1010. We got open phone lines, and we'd love to hear from you about some of this coronavirus stuff. Now, we do have a lot of things to share with you about that, but we'd certainly love to have you on the air and share with us what you're thinking about some of this as well. But I'll tell you, some of these kids, these spring breakers, they got on video, are just absolutely hilarious. And one of the guys, like I said, kind of went viral, and he has kind of the line of the week, if you want to hear it.
If I get corona, I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying.
If I get corona, I get corona.
I like how he delivers it, too. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying. Just very businesslike. I've got something to do here. I've got to party.
These kids have been planning for this for a long time. You can't take away their youth. You can't take away all their fun. Here's another one that was videoed. And I love her honesty, actually. I got to appreciate her honesty.
Yeah, we planned this a long time ago, and it was kind of up in the air if we were going to still go. But, we're here. I just turned 21 this year, so I'm here to party, so it's kind of disappointing. But we're just making the most of it. We met these other people in our little Airbnb spot, so we're just hanging out with them and trying to get drunk before everything closes.
She was getting drunker as she gave that little sound bite.
Oh, you ought to see the video.
As everything closes.
That's right. As the alcohol was absorbing into her body.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and we've seen some stories, although I have to say it's only been a few. They said, I think, 5 students got coronavirus from being at spring break. Now, that may just be the ones you're saying 6 now.
Mm-hmm.
They've counted 6.
Now, one of them wasn't on that same trip, but they've got 6 UT students.
Okay. But how many kids went to spring break? I'd be interested to know on the percentages. Well, I guess we'll find out now if in the next couple of weeks, because that apparently it can take that long to develop the symptoms, and that would be what would trigger you to go and get tested. But maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll see, whether there's a whole rash of coronavirus cases among these college students that went on spring break. I just don't know. I think it's got to be still fairly limited. In fact, it's almost so limited that, you really, we've talked about this on the show, and we're not anti-public health by any stretch of the imagination, but, and this is even being talked about in a lot of circles, is the cure or is the fix worse than the problem itself? Mm-hmm. And with all of these shutdowns, I mean, I've got some serious concerns about the long-term impact to our economy. You know, we've got a lot of people out of work all of a sudden. And, of course, if they shut down the city of Tampa and issue a shelter-in-place order, you know, we're going to have a lot more people out of work. I mean, they're designating are they designating as essential? They're designating grocery stores, pharmacies. Interestingly enough, liquor stores get designated as essential. You know, I suppose you could speculate on why that might be.
Got to clean your hands.
The most expensive hand sanitizer you could buy, Pat George. Johnny Walker Blue. Tell you what.
If you inspect my pantry, you'll know why liquor stores are essential.
Liquor stores are essential.
Yes, wine.
I went to her house last week.
Oh, you went to her house? You broke the social distancing order?
She carries one baby around and the other one's sleeping, but when it gets up, you know, you need that liquor store.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Yes, we do.
You know, we can look at the response to, and I don't have the exact numbers pulled up, but I think about 100,000 people got sick and maybe about 10 or 11,000 died. Now, the number of people
worldwide.
we're talking about, and I'm sorry, I should preface this with, I'm talking about swine flu.
Oh, swine flu. Okay.
Swine flu 11 years ago, because what I was kind of thinking about was, you know, look at the response to swine flu, and you can pull up the numbers for me if you can get them. I had them somewhere, but, you know, you're looking at the response to swine flu, and it was totally different, although there were some elements, some echoes of what we've got now. But listen to this Lou Dobbs report from CNN from back in 2009, and listen to Mayor Bloomberg in New York City talking about swine flu and what they were going to do about it.
Traditional flu season is over, but swine flu seems to be spreading at a great rate. Suddenly today in New York City, St. David's, a private school, closed after 12% of its 400 students reported flu-like symptoms. In New York City, 11,000 students stayed home. 16 public schools closed. But incredibly, Mayor Bloomberg says you can't wall yourself off and will only close schools on a case-by-case basis. That despite the advice of his city health commissioner, who will soon be the head of the Centers for Disease Control.
I've asked the question, what would you do, Dr. Frieden, if you wanted to prevent the spread of flu among the entire student population? And the answer is close the schools for a month, prohibit all interaction between kids outside of school, and even then, there's no guarantee that you would do that.
The mayor's office defended itself against charges it acted too slowly to close the schools down. Mitchell Weiner, a school administrator, died Sunday. The mayor closed the school shortly after he was hospitalized Thursday. He had an underlying condition, the mayor's office said, but would not confirm details. With more than 5,000 cases now in the United States, swine flu has hit 48 states and contributed to 6 deaths. Dr. Vincent Racaniello of Columbia Medical, one of the top scientists in the country, says this strain has not been seen before.
This strain is different because it is spreading, and it's spreading globally, as you know. The real concern is that most people are not going to be immune to it, so many people will be infected.
Some virologists are concerned it could mutate by the traditional fall season.
Now, the head of the World Health Organization today held a press conference refusing to raise the level above a level 5 and just below declaring a pandemic. They say it would stay at that time for the time being.
Think about that. I mean, does that sound a little bit familiar? And listen to Bloomberg joking about it, saying you can't boil yourself off. I mean, this guy wanted to be president. And now one of the things that caught my ear about that news report is what I didn't hear. And what I didn't hear was anybody saying that President Obama had any responsibility in that whole process. You know, Dr. Anthony Fauci was active back then as well, a big hero right now, and he was active back then as well. And we've got some clips from some of what he had to say about it. Now, he sounded much more circumspect at the time. And have you got the numbers pulled up? You got SARS, MERS. Where's swine flu?
Swine flu is not on that list.
Okay. All right. Well, what can we do? What can we do? We'll get you the exact numbers when we come back from the break, maybe. But we've got a few other clips to share with you. Wanted to share something off of CNBC. Kyle Bass had some pretty funny things to say when the host was trying to convince him you've got to call this COVID-19. You can't call it the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus or the Wuhan flu. You can't say anything that identifies where this outbreak started, just like we do with all other viruses like Ebola, Zika, the Spanish flu, which, by the way, Wikipedia is renaming to the 1918 influenza epidemic. But we've always called it the Spanish flu. We went over some of the other names with you last week, like the Hong Kong flu and others, names that we have used in the past. Viruses are almost always named for their point of the first outbreak. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Morgan, I've got some of those swine flu numbers for you. If you don't have them up on your screen over there, we're looking at 12,469 deaths in the United States. And that swine flu infected nearly 61 million people in the U.S.
Interesting. So, compare those numbers. How many have we got on COVID-19 so far? What is it about?
30-some thousand. We might be up to 35,000 cases in the United States. And I'll have to double check on those.
So 35,000 compared to about 60 million?
And 458 deaths so far in the United States.
Compared to over 10,000?
Yes, 12,400.
Wow. So, the swine flu in 2009, at least to date, was a much bigger deal, right? And you heard the World Health Organization didn't even want to declare that a pandemic. And I don't remember the media going after President Barack Obama at the time and saying he wasn't doing enough or he wasn't managing this crisis. So I just think that's useful as kind of a comparison in terms of what's going on with the media.
And I think just the way information was disseminated even 10 years ago, we're talking about people spending less time on their phones and getting it instantaneously and more time waiting until they watch the news at night or waiting until, so I think it was the way it was delivered and the frequency at which.
Sure. Yeah, they've worked everybody up into a frenzy. And, of course, the concern, I think, with the way they're responding to it this time around, and look, maybe, one of the things I think we've been focusing on this show is saying, we just don't know that much about this virus even yet. So we just don't know what's going to come of all this. But the way they're focusing on dealing with it was shutting down the entire country. And then you see the news stories rolling in, talking about maybe up to 30% unemployment in our near future. This sounds pretty dire. I think this could be a lot worse. Let's just put it this way, and again, not trying to minimize anything out of this Wuhan virus, but the number of cases and the number of deaths is significantly less than the regular seasonal flu. And, of course, you look at the media, and you've got all these stories about what it's like to get this particular Wuhan virus. And what I'm noticing, now they're anecdotal stories, but they make it sound pretty horrible. They're really not focusing on the fact that they also have stories out there that say something like 86% of people who get this don't even have any symptoms at all. So you're talking about really the smallest number, something less than 5% are going to get a really severe reaction, a really severe sickness from this particular virus. And that's very similar to the seasonal flu. There is a certain percentage of people who get the seasonal flu who get extremely sick, and obviously a certain percentage who even die from it. And what are they dying from? They're dying from pneumonia, right? They're drowning in the secretions from their own lungs. But you ought to read some of these news articles describing the Wuhan virus and what people have to go through. And they say, this is much worse than the flu. Well, it's much worse than most of our experiences with the flu, because most of us who've ever had the flu, even if we've had a bad case of the flu, it's knocked us on our tail for about 5 or 6 days, right? That's what the flu is. It's a real bad cold, at least in our minds. And what they're saying here is people get really bad pneumonia from coronavirus. Well, guess what? People get really bad pneumonia from the flu, too. So you can also get just as sick from the seasonal flu.
What I also found to be sort of something to look at is how people are describing their symptoms. And because they're going so in depth, you have a doctor who had it and he was describing everything he was going through. And for someone to actually write down how many times they coughed something up and the nature of it, it sounds pretty graphic and scary and gross. But when you're actually sick and you're going through a terrible cold or flu, it is what it is. And again, I'm not minimizing it at all, but it's just the nature of specifying your symptoms is alarming to people.
Yeah, right. Well, and, you read these things and they're describing it in such detail. And even I'm thinking, I'm going to get that version of it. My luck, that'll be what I get, right? And that's what we're all thinking. And maybe that's the point of flooding our news feeds with these stories, is to get you thinking you're going to get the worst of the worst of the worst out of this. And you know what? Your life is over, and therefore you better hide in your house and just hope and pray that you don't get this terrible, terrible thing. When the reality on the ground is that so far, not a lot of people have got it. Of those who've gotten it, not a lot of people have gotten the more severe version of it. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who think they may have already even had this thing. I mean, we all know people, I would imagine, and maybe not, but we all know people who've gotten sick this year already with something that they thought was not quite the flu. It was something worse than the flu. And so, I've talked to several people myself who have told me, I think I had this thing back in January because I got so sick and I didn't really know what it was. But I came out of it, again, an experience like those years when you do happen to get the flu and you get a bad case of it, one that you really notice as opposed to just thinking you've got some kind of seasonal cold during winter. But one of those years where you're like, well, this is more than a cold. I've had the flu. You know it.
One of two things can happen. That we'll either learn to wash our hands more, stay distance, and when someone has the flu or something, stay home. Or when this corona's gone and the flu comes back, people will go, it's just a flu. Don't worry about it. And everybody will be hugging and kissing and, it's not coronavirus.
Exactly.
Well, one of the things about making this whole thing about the Wuhan flu racist, if you use the word Wuhan, the name of the city where it started, or if you say the Chinese virus, as President Trump has been doing, that's somehow racist. But you go back just a month and a half or so, and that's what everybody in the liberal media was saying. That's the entire group of them were using these same names and without even flinching, because they weren't using it as a point to attack President Trump.
This is all happening at a time that we're starting to see a message shift here, because you're starting to hear the Republicans, especially Trump, Wuhan or the Chinese coronavirus. They're looking for someone to blame.
Concern is growing this morning over an outbreak of a new SARS-like virus in China. At least 6 people have died from the Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus. The Wuhan coronavirus.
The 34-year-old ophthalmologist diagnosed Saturday with the Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan virus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
These
What
are
more
all
can you tell us
CNN.
about the similarities or differences between SARS and the Wuhan coronavirus?
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus in China.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus. And the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
Fears continue to grow over the outbreak.
Anyway.
I think the newscast would be better if you played that music all the time underneath. The clown car music.
Yeah, exactly.
And what is this? We can't say Chinese food anymore.
Well, that's it. That's it, Pat George. You nailed it. Is it Chinese food? No, you can't. I mean, it's just silly. It's absolutely silly. And you see the pattern that the media is engaging in. President Trump can't do anything right. He can't do anything right. We had some clips. Something seems to be going on. I think my little device here has picked up the Wuhan coronavirus because it suddenly stopped wanting to let me play my clips. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get to those clips because we had a couple of good ones from his press conferences over the past week. So I don't think we're going to get to them just because it doesn't look like it's getting any better, right? It's going on the ventilator right now. But as we're speaking, they should be voting on, I know they rescheduled the vote. I saw originally they'd rescheduled it for 12 noon today, and this is the vote on that bailout package that, of all people, it's like a Democrat dream wish list. This is everything they ever wanted. This is everything Bernie's talked about. giving money. This is Andrew Yang and the Yang Gang. This is sending everybody $1,000 a month. I mean, this is what they wanted, and now they're saying it's not enough. I mean, I'm just amazed at how quickly our entire country is being turned upside down. And believe me, I'm not naive. We were already pretty far gone into a quasi-socialist economy. You know, we like to consider ourselves capitalists, but the truth is we've got such a large government, so much regulation, so much government control, including of the financial system, that anymore it's really not a free market. Yeah, we have sort of a veneer of free market economy and a veneer of capitalism sort of pasted over a cake of socialism, which is what we're living under essentially. But I'm amazed at how quickly in the last couple of weeks it's getting dramatically worse. I mean, even the Republicans think the way to fix this, the way to solve it, is somehow to give a bunch of money to people. I mean, you understand that in the history of the world, this strategy has never worked. It simply doesn't work. I guess it sounds great on paper if you don't know anything about history. And that's the only thing I can understand, because it doesn't sound great on paper to me, and yet a lot of people seem to think, well, this sounds great on paper. If we just give people the money, it will just get things flowing again. See, the economy's out of gas right now, and what we need to do is just give people the money, which is the gas, to get the engine firing again. No, that's not it at all. What makes the engine fire is people being out there working and trying to create things and economic activity, not just giving money to them and letting them purchase things, which is going to lead to inflation. We'll cover more on this when we come back. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We got the system working again. I had to reset it over the break, so I just wanted to see about running with a few of these clips that I did want to share with y'all. And we'll start out with the Kyle Bass clip on CNBC, because I heard this one and I just loved it. This is on CNBC with Brian Sullivan, and listen to the host basically beg him not to call it the Chinese virus.
Let's just call it COVID-19, not Wuhan or China or, coronavirus. Let's call it the COVID-19. Kyle, I think that'll bring us all together. Can
that'll
we do
bring
that?
Us together.
Come up with a common name?
You know what, Brian, I'll agree with you on a lot of things, but, changing the naming convention for viruses that's gone on for the last 100 years, the point of origin has always helped people understand which virus it is. And the Chinese Communist Party has asked the world, or actually really propagandized the world with this COVID-19. If we start naming diseases after numbers, we're never going to remember what kind of disease it is.
I understand. I want to make sure we don't make it, we don't take it to a country level. You know what I mean? Because this is the global fight. You would agree with that, right?
We call things West Nile virus. Why don't we call it the Wuhan flu? We can call it whatever we want to call it. I'm not going to call it what the Chinese government wants me to call it.
He's not going to call it what the Chinese government wants him to call it.
Joining us here exclusively on CBC, Kyle.
And neither should you as well. You should call it whatever you want to call it. And if that's the Wuhan flu or the Chinese virus, and if the president wants to call it that, I support him 100%. Like Kyle Bass said, and he's the manager of a big, hedge fund type of an entity. Like he said, though, this is the way we've been naming viruses for 100 years, and probably more than that, frankly. So this is a time-tested way that we name viruses from their point of origin, which helps us to distinguish which one we're talking about. I mean, we talked about last week even with the swine flu was named after swine because that's where the virus came from. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's kind of front and center in this whole situation, he was involved back with the swine flu epidemic as well. Now, speaking in much more measured tones and much less reactionary than he is today. Today, he says we've got to shut down the entire economy. And I want to tell you a little something about Dr. Anthony Fauci when we get done with this clip. But listen to him here in 2009 talking about the swine flu.
How can a person tell if they have the regular seasonal flu or if they've contracted the 2009 H1N1 influenza virus?
Well, for a person, him or herself, to be able to determine that would essentially be impossible, because you can get everything from very, very mild illness to severe illness with either seasonal flu or the H1N1 new 2009 pandemic flu. Most of the time, it's a mild disease but there are unusual cases that can be severe. The only way a person can tell is if they get their blood drawn or other laboratory tests, which could specifically distinguish between one and the other. But that is something that is not done routinely. So if someone wakes up in the morning and feels that they're not well, they get a fever, muscle ache, some cough, the things that you would get with the flu, it would be very difficult for them to determine whether it's seasonal flu or the H1N1.
So, I mean, it's basically, it parallels, if you're listening to it, it parallels what we're dealing with now. You can have everything from mild symptoms. First of all, it's very similar to the seasonal flu. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, none of these things that people are reporting have happened to them are that much different than how you feel with the seasonal flu. You know, sort of body aches, difficulty breathing, fever, cough, things like that. Yeah, that's the same with the seasonal flu and this Wuhan coronavirus as well. So the parallels are simply there between what's happening today and what happened with the swine flu a little more than 10 years ago. And the question is, why are we responding so much differently at this time? Why are we making this such a, this is the end of the world type of story? And that's exactly what the media has been doing. I mean, just nonstop. You've got to stay home. We've got to close down the cities. And you know what? Maybe they're right. I don't know. We don't know enough about this virus, but they certainly haven't shared with us anything that would lead me to believe it's that much different than the swine flu virus was back in 2009.
Is it just because it is more contagious and it has a different sort of inoculation period, incubation period, where you don't know if you have it for 14 days?
It's a good question. I mean, a lot of people apparently, I've seen the stories, 86% don't ever know they have it. I mean, what are we dealing with here? You could always slice the pie pretty thinly and look at one factor and say, well, you might not know if you have it for a long period of time or not. And based on that alone, we're going to make all these assumptions. I'd like to hear the logic spelled out. That's what I'd like to hear. I mean, did they really make these decisions because they think there's going to be up to 2 million U.S. deaths from this? And that's that Royal College study that came out of England that they apparently were looking at. It's hard to know. I mean, nobody has really explained to us why we're taking such draconian measures and shutting down our entire economy, which is going to be a lot harder to bring back. I mean, because it's a domino effect, it's a domino of this baseline economic activity that people engage in from day to day is what supports a lot of the other things that we're doing. And already you see, people are pulling money out of investments. Well, that's not just Wall Street investments, which you've seen a dramatic decline in the money in the financial markets, but you're also looking at people not putting investments into small businesses. And that's really the key driver and has historically always been the key driver of our economy, Main Street. I mean, if you're a small business owner right now, you may well be shut down. I think we've got something like 9 different states with different versions of stay-at-home orders in place. And a lot of small businesses are small retail, restaurants, bars, things like that. That's a lot of our small businesses. And they don't have 2 or 3 months of cash, just like we talked about in China, those small businesses. They don't have 2 or 3 months of cash to just ride this out. And they don't have the money to pay their employees.
I'll tell you who has a lot of cash, though. The ATMs. They said don't take your money out of the ATMs because there's tons of money the Federal Reserve is going to pump into the banks, and your money is safe.
Well, you were watching 60 Minutes last night with Neil Kashkari, right? He's the president of the Minnesota Federal Reserve. And he says, and it's nice to hear somebody finally being somewhat honest with us about this, but he says that the Federal Reserve has an infinite capacity to print dollars. Infinite. Not there are absolutely no limits whatsoever. Well, and that may well be true, but just remember, in the Weimar Republic in Germany, they also had an infinite capacity to print their fiat currency. And what can happen when you really put that pedal to the metal, which is what we've been doing solid now for a long time. I mean, we're talking over 10 years. We've steady had the QE situation going in our country where we're doing quantitative easing. We're having the Federal Reserve. I mean, the federal government's now talking about taking equity positions in U.S. businesses to try to, quote unquote, prop up the economy. I mean, how is it that in America we could be talking about the government beginning to own businesses? I mean, that is what you talk about in communist countries and socialist countries, right, is central ownership. That's what China, that's the situation in China. China owns all their big companies. Their government owns it. Now, they may have different structures that they can try to engage in some sort of plausible deniability about whether or not they actually own it. But China, the country, the government itself, the Communist Party, which is the government of the state of China, owns its major industries, its big businesses outright. They own them. And that's what we're talking about doing here. So I guess we've got to kill our country to save our country. We've got to destroy our country to save it. I mean, that's basically what they're telling us. But think about, we had a scare where we thought, some of us thought, that we could get into a hyperinflationary type of a scenario, which is where you see the relative value of your dollars drop precipitously. And so this $1,000 that they're sending you to spend, what do you think happens when they do that? I mean, you give everybody $1,000 more dollars, the prices are going to go up, right? That's inflation. What it means is it's not so much that the prices go up, is prices are what they call nominal or just named prices. What we're really talking about is the value of the dollar goes down. All right, we got a caller.
Byron, you're on with Morgan Streetman.
Hey, how are you guys?
Great, Byron. Thanks for calling. What you got to say today?
Well, I just want to know, is the American experiment out and the Asian experiment in yet, or how's it going over there?
Well, that's sure what it's looking like, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. I seem to think back to what my father, a military guy of his entire life, had to say, and he said, just start looking for these little red flags and, just make sure that those things aren't, popping up out of nowhere. Things like the word infinite with our buddy Kashkari that you just mentioned.
Right.
I mean, that's the scariest thing to hear, those words, infinite. Wow. That was breathtaking hearing that last night.
Well, think about what they can do if they can print an infinite number of dollars and thus devalue every existing dollar. If you've tried your whole life to save, if you've, quote unquote, done the right thing and you've worked hard and you've put your money away in savings, what they're doing is they're totally devaluing your savings. It's like a form of hidden taxation because they're transferring it to the new people that they give these new dollars to. So they're rewarding bad behavior. They're rewarding the grasshopper who fiddled when he should have been working. And they say, oh, you know what? Here's $1,000, Mr. Grasshopper. Go get your food. You'll have plenty. And the ant who saved up the $1,000, technically gets punished because that $1,000 the ant saved is worth a lot less. If you know, I'm referring to that old fable about the ant and the grasshopper, if you don't know what I'm doing here, folks. But I'm trying to bring to mind that thought process, and it basically said you need to work, and you need to work steadily, and that's how wealth is built. It's not built all at once in some kind of big event. It's not through partying all the time when you should be working, or going down and saying, you know what, if I get corona, I get corona. It's built by steady working and being conservative in your value structure. But all that can be taken away if they open up the printing presses to full speed.
And isn't that another way to sort of implement socialism?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it looks like. Byron, don't you think that all of a sudden...
I truly agree that it all started even further back. And so they just slowly, the banksters, the Federal Reserve, of course, I refer as banksters, got their little wormy hands.
That's a good one.
Wilson, they just worked their way in, and that's it. It took them about 100 years, and, here we are, 1929, 2029, coming to a nation falling near you.
Well, thanks for your call, Byron. You got some great points there, and I hope people will go out there and check out, the book out there, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which explains the founding of the Federal Reserve back in 1913 and how that actually came about. It's a really interesting story. It amounts to a conspiracy, but it's a great story, a true story about how they founded the Federal Reserve, and we're now reaping what we've sown.
When you need an attorney, whether it's business law, contracts, construction, consumer rights, even personal injury, who are you going to call? Call Morgan Streetman. Attorney Morgan Streetman should be the first person you call when you need legal counsel. He has a wealth of experience in business transactions and disputes. He advises small and closely held businesses on all of their legal needs. Those needs range from contracts with customers and vendors to employee relations and human resources issues to shareholder or member disputes, just to name a few. Part of Morgan Streetman's business practice is his focus on representing construction-related businesses and individuals. He handles every aspect of construction law, drafting contracts, licensing, liens, and construction defect claims. When you need an attorney, call Morgan Streetman at 813-227-8689. 813-227-8689. Go to his website at streetmanlaw.com. That's streetmanlaw.com.
Restrictions may apply. Plans and costs for coverage may vary. Call Protect My Car for details. These days, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a car, truck, or SUV made from 1999 or higher, you could stop paying for car repairs. That's right. You might not have to pay a penny to have it repaired. Just dial ** 1244 on your mobile phone now to see if you qualify. You must have an automobile made from 1999 or higher, and all repairs for your engine, transmission, and much more can become a thing of the past. Dial ** 1244 on your mobile phone today and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. That's right, total protection for your car and no more repair bills. Plus, free roadside assistance, free towing, free car rental, and free oil changes. Just dial ** 1244 on your mobile phone now to see if your car qualifies. That's ** 1244. Never pay for car repairs again. Just dial * 1244 on your mobile phone now. Dial ** 1244.
Hi, this is Aaron Davis, owner of Hillsborough Title. Hillsborough Title is a local, family-owned title agency here in Tampa Bay. Our service, strength, and knowledge make us different. We've served Tampa Bay area for over 30 years. From Polk County to the Gulf, Pasco to Manatee, Tampa Bay, we've got you covered. Call us at 813-712-8888, 712-8888, or visit us on the web at thebesttitle.com, thebesttitle.com. That's thebesttitle.com.
I'm Katrina Madewell with Keller Williams Realty and Tampa Home Talk, and for more than 23 years, we have been helping homeowners sell. Flexible terms with the right to sell it yourself. Let my results speak.
They were able to get us a full price offer and a contract in our house in 9 days.
I just wanted to express my gratitude in finding a cash buyer for my property in less than 24 hours.
I'm not bragging. I'm applying for a job. I want to be your realtor. Call 813-777-1196. Thank you.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. I'll tell you what, Morgan, I learned something even deeper. I think I do a good job of staying on top of these events, but every time we finish this show, I've learned so much more in-depth information I need.
Well, and let me tell you, there is so much more that we don't get to cover. I had 40 audio clips ready to go for today's show. So we never know exactly what direction we're going to go in. And, you know, we've got some basically the whole show's kind of been an out there show the last couple of weeks. So we haven't done any other crazy stories because I perceive that right now what people really want to hear about, what they want to talk about, is this Wuhan coronavirus. That's what people want to know. And in fact, Pat, you were reporting to us that the governor is up at the Villages speaking right now.
Speaking of audio clips, he's at the Villages and he's talking about the tent city they're putting up so you can drive your car in there or your golf cart, get tested. And he said because now the testing is happening more often, less hospitalization.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because they're catching it at the beginning, I guess?
Right, yeah. And
well,
apparently there are a whole bunch of masks. 60,000 masks are coming into the hospital workers in the area.
And they need those.
In the next day or so.
Well, we just don't know how many people have this. And, of course, if a lot more people have it than what we realize, then the fatality rate goes way down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's a lot of people who aren't even symptomatic, and, again, we've all seen the stories, I assume, saying 86% of people are asymptomatic. That means they have no symptoms at all. Then that means there's a lot more people out there who have this than we have any concept of, and that the mortality rate is a lot lower than what we expected. Now, these are things that we just don't know at this point, and we don't know what we don't know, unfortunately, to kind of reference back to something that's kind of been made a joke of, the unknown unknowns. I mean, there are so many things about this virus that we don't know. And in this case, we don't even know what we don't know about it still to this day because we just haven't had the opportunity to study it. We do know a lot of things about it. And one of the people, I wanted to just reference back to this because we didn't quite get to it earlier, and one of the people who is very active in this screenplay that we're all watching play out here is Dr. Anthony Fauci. But I wanted to cover for you a couple of things that he did back in 2012 and around that time frame, because if you didn't know, he is a huge fan of Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton. So here is his email from Saturday, June 2nd of 2012. And this may just give you a different thought process about Dr. Anthony Fauci. And, it's just interesting. I'll just put it that way. It's just interesting to think about this guy and his thoughts on, at the time, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. But he writes this to Cheryl Mills. You remember that name? That's one of Secretary Clinton's chief deputies. And he says, Cheryl, and also he writes it to a lady named Lois Calm. But he says, Cheryl/Lois. Wow! Very rarely does a speech bring me to tears, but this one did it. Talk about telling it like it is. This was bases loaded, home run. Please tell the secretary that I love her more than ever. You guys too, of course. This is Dr. Anthony Fauci talking about a Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton speech. Now, I don't know about you. I watched a few Hillary Clinton speeches. None of them came anywhere close to bringing me to tears, nor would I call any of them a bases-loaded home run. The lady was pretty boring, and if you had any sense of history, you knew she was full of it anyway. So why is that going to bring you to tears? You believe this stuff? Here he is a little bit later in January of 2013, again writing to Cheryl Mills saying, Cheryl, anyone who had any doubts about the secretary's stamina and capability following her illness had those doubts washed away by today's performance before the Senate and the House. She faced extremely difficult circumstances at the hearings, and still she hit it right out of the park. Please tell her that we all love her and we are very proud to know her. Warm regards, Tony.
And he loves baseball, too.
I mean, he loves the baseball analogies, doesn't he? She knocked it out of the park, Cheryl. And once again, she's going to have the highest batting average of any Secretary of State ever. Well, I don't know if we've got time to get to some of these President Trump clips. I mean, there's so many things I wanted to cover. I'm concerned about people being out of work. I really am. We've seen some statistics quoted, and J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs seem to be in this up-the-ante war where each of them keeps naming a higher coming unemployment rate, and it was topped most recently, at least the last time that I've been able to check, by J.P. Morgan saying they think the jobless rate is going to 30%, which would be a rate of unemployment that we've basically never seen in this country. So if that comes to pass, I mean, we literally will have completely destroyed our economy, and it's not the easiest thing. It's not like just plugging the refrigerator back in before all the food goes bad. It's not the easiest thing in the world to fix once you do certain types of damage to it. And some of the damage that we're doing structurally, like we've talked about, printing a bunch of money, nationalizing businesses, now let's just call it for what it is, and hooking everybody, they talk about we're going to make funds available through these SBA loans. I'm sorry, but as a small business person myself, I don't want to have to take a loan. I pride myself on operating without taking loans because I don't want the bank coming in and taking my business or telling me what to do because they've got all kinds of rights that come under these loan agreements. But now you're saying we have to take a loan from the Small Business Administration? I mean, if you're a small business attorney and you've ever dealt with loans from the Small Business Administration, they're absolutely ruthless about them. They're absolutely ruthless about these loans. They will put people into bankruptcy without even flinching. They take no haircut. They refuse to take a haircut because, of course, in their minds, they're guarding the taxpayer's investment in your business by making the loan to you, which was a government-backed loan. So if you don't pay it back, then the government's got to pay it back. And so they will not, the government may eventually have to pay it back, but they're not letting you off the hook in the meantime. And if that means you have to file bankruptcy, I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again with people who take SBA loans. So now it doesn't happen, obviously, in all businesses. Many businesses work, and they're able to eventually pay back those loans and get the government off of their backs. But if things go bad like they did during the 2008 financial crisis and what appears to be happening right now, you can't work to pay off those loans because your business is just gone. If you took an SBA loan to open a restaurant recently, you're in real trouble. Hey, just one other thing we want to try to hit before I know the music's about to start coming up. And I really have to tell you, folks, I'm so disappointed because I have so many other things I wanted to cover with you, including some of the new treatments like chloroquine, which are really seem to be showing some promise. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. But how about the story that came out last night that Harvey Weinstein has coronavirus all of a sudden? Now, I want to tell you something. If you look at the parallel stories coming out of New York State, they're saying let all the people out of jail who have coronavirus. Now, wouldn't that just be too convenient that Harvey Weinstein, the second he lands in jail, just somehow comes down with coronavirus, and they got to let the guy out of jail? And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about let people out of jail. Anybody over 50 years old, anybody who's in jail on a parole violation, anybody who's got any comorbidities, that means other things wrong with them that could cause them to die from a coronavirus, from catching coronavirus, we ought to just let them all out of jail. I mean, this is completely insane. It's a complete turnaround of our whole system. Folks, thanks for joining us. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.